And welcome to the QCast Season 2, Episode 21. And I have to start the QCast off with a disclaimer that those of you tuning in that count on me for insightful Division III basketball commentary might question my guest choice today. But I need to go to the fine print of the QCast, which says the QCast is interviews with interesting people across many fronts with a focus on Division III athletics. Brian Evans from Indiana, would you agree that you are an interesting person? Would you agree with that?
I think I'm not from the D3 world for sure. I don't know if I'm interesting though.
You're clearly not from the D3 world, but I would say don't sell yourself short. You're a very interesting person, and doggone it, people like you. Folks, it's Brian Evans, the 1996 Big Ten Men's Basketball Player of the Year, first round NBA draft pick of the Orlando Magic. And Brian, we'll get into how our worlds have crossed here, but how the heck are you doing there in Carmel, Indiana?
We're doing good, Bob. We're staying indoors today. It's still hot and muggy around here, and some thunder showers. So we're chilling on a Saturday afternoon here in Carmel.
Well, that's good. And I appreciate you doing this. We got to talking last week that maybe we ought to give this a run. I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff around your career at Indiana, maybe pre, maybe post, things that a lot of people that follow hoops can get a lot of stuff out of. And so this is going to be fun. Let me just add, the family all good? Everyone good there in the Evans household?
Everyone's good. We got the wife and the oldest daughter up and visiting colleges this weekend. And so they're gone, which has been nice. So it's me and the three young ones, but everybody's good.
Okay. And we'll get into some interesting news with one of the daughters that has shaken up in the last about week and a half here that involves another Big Ten institution. And I want to get your take on all of that. But first, Brian, we should talk about the fact that you are the pride of the Terre Haute South Braves. Remind me, were you born in Terre Haute, or I want to say you kind of maybe moved into Terre Haute at a very young age? Is that correct?
Well, I'm a little bit disappointed in your early recon here. This should be on the Wikipedia page.
I feel like Rockford, Illinois, it has come up.
I'm an Illinois guy. I was born in Rockford, Illinois. That's right. No, moved to Terre Haute at age 2, 3, 4-ish. And but no, I'm an Illinois guy for sure. That's why I'm on this podcast.
That's why you are a Cubs fan, I believe, correct?
Cubs fan, Bears fan, absolutely.
So Terre Haute, and this is kind of where this is where we start to pick up on the intersection. So folks, the reason that Brian and I know each other, it's not because people are probably like, man, this guy must have played at Manchester for Alford for a year and then went to Indiana after that, or maybe this guy went to DePaul for a while. That's not the case, guys. So Brian Evans is his longtime childhood, lifelong best friend was a wonderful gentleman named Brian Riley Travis. And Brian is my wife Rosemary's brother. And Brian, of course, passed away from a brain tumor, from brain cancer. And don't mean to start the QCast off, Brian, on a sad note, but talk about kind of growing up and when you met Rose's brother Brian, and some of the fun times there in Terre Haute as kids.
Yeah, so I met him for the first time about 5 or 6 years old, actually playing baseball. And we're on the same team. And his old man, believe it or not, was the coach. So Don Travis, your father-in-law, was the first coach of any organized sport that I ever had, if you can believe that. So we played baseball before we got going with basketball. So my first ever coach was Don Travis.
We'll have to later on in the show, we'll have to compare him to Coach Knight.
Yeah.
We'll have to kind of break
we'll do a comparison, just the head-to-head, the two of those guys. Yeah, so you know what? But I didn't really can't say I really knew Brian. You're on the same team at that age, and all we have to really is to look at the team picture. I don't really think we knew one another, and then we really got to be buddies in 7th grade. So I went to a Catholic school from K through 6, and then 7th grade went over to the public school, and that's when I met up with him for the first time, and kind of became fast friends, and the rest was history.
And Brian also went to Indiana University at the time you were there. And what were your recollections of hanging with B back in the days when you were rolling for the Hoosiers and he was on campus? Those must have been some pretty memorable times, huh?
We had so much fun. I mean, it was just such a great campus and a great run, a great 5 years. He looking back, it happened so fast. Like we weren't sure where he was going to go to school, so I committed, in like October, November of our senior year of high school. And I was somewhat in shock because I wasn't what they would call it nowadays a 5 or 4 or 3-star recruit. I don't know what I was, but if it was in today's game, it'd probably be a 1-star kind of guy at best. And so it was just hard to believe that I'd been offered the scholarship that I had by Coach Knight. And that senior year was a blur. We were really focused on trying to have a good team, and we ended up going to the state finals and lost to Alan Henderson's team, an IU teammate of mine. But I wasn't sure, I don't even know how often I asked Brian where he was going to go to school or anything. It's crazy that he and a bunch of other good friends of mine all just kind of went to IU. You almost wonder if I hadn't gone, if those guys would have gone somewhere else. I know he was serious about Marquette and a couple other places. But a lot of those guys, I think were just like, they got accepted to IU, like, hey, this is going to be fun. We're going to have fun if we all go to IU at the same time while he's playing. And that's how it unfolded. So his dorm was, 100 yards from mine, and he stayed with another buddy of ours. So I was around those guys all the time. First year when I was in the dorms with a teammate as a roommate, I still hung out with those guys. And then when we finally got an apartment after our freshman year, we lived together, and just, oh my God, how much fun did we have? It's amazing.
Of course, I mentioned that Brian succumbed to brain cancer. Obviously, so many people in the United States, across the world, are impacted by cancer. And I know that, Brian, you've had a lot of kind of tragedy in your life. I think you lost your parents at fairly early age. And, just thinking a few years ago, you lost your teammate from the Hoosiers, right? That was a incredibly sad moment for you. And then, Brian Travis, not to take this down a dark road. We'll certainly talk about some fun stuff, but you're such a positive person, and you've had, all of this kind of tough stuff around you. How have you managed to kind of stay just, so positive, and such a great outlook all the time?
Well, I don't know that I always do, but you go, and if you spend any time in the hospital, and if you go and support somebody that's going through cancer like he was going through, or my wife's been through it, you realize that there's so many people that are being impacted all over the place. You go in for a treatment, and there are so many people in the room with you at that time, and that's going on every day at every hospital around the country. So, I get really passionate about the Dickie V, Valvano, don't give up, don't ever get up. That speech is so amazing. And we need to be raising money for cancer, to cure cancer. There's no question. It's impacting so many people and so many people's lives. And see, the attitude I have is you can't feel sorry for yourself. So many people are going through it. It can't be a woe is me kind of thing. It's like, we know it's out there. And it's, we just got to do something about it. But yeah, there's only one way through it. When you're faced with something like that, it's to go straight through the middle. There's no hiding from it. And it's tough stuff. There's no doubt about it.
Looking back a little bit to growing up in Indiana and kind of the presence of basketball around you, I know this from talking to my wife about this in tons of detail many, many times. And she was older than you and Brian. So she really was at an age where when Larry Bird was playing in town for Indiana State, she was at an age where she remembers that Final Four run extremely well. Now, you guys were younger, but I suspect that was still an awful big deal to you. What were your memories of Larry Legend playing in town and just the influence he had on you growing up?
Well, I got a Larry Legend T-shirt on. I
There
don't
it
know if you
is.
saw the Indiana State
There it is.
T-shirt that I got going on. Yeah, we were 6, 7 years old at the time, so I'm sure she remembers it way better than we do. I certainly hadn't caught the basketball bug at that point, at that age, but you remember there was a buzz in town for sure. Everybody was talking about it. That's kind of what I remember. Just hearing the name Larry Bird, knowing that he played basketball in Indiana State. Not a lot beyond that, but just that the town was just alive. Like you think about that. I still think about that. Like, how in the world did he take a team of no names and put them on his back and take them to the title game undefeated? It's unbelievable. It really is.
Incredible story. And of course, then you, I'm sure, became, when we talk about the 80s, we all had to make choices. We had Lakers, Celtics, we had Sixers, a few others, but I'm quite certain that you were on the Celtics wagon that whole entire ride. Is that fair to say? Big Bird Celtics fan.
Everybody was. I knew of the Pacers, but a huge part of Indiana followed him to the Celtics. There's no doubt about that. I wonder about that, how much that set the Pacers back. The whole state of Indiana were Bird people. There's no doubt.
Right.
And they were so good that makes it real easy to jump on the bandwagon for the people that were kind of undecided. The Pacers, as you know, they were still kind of new to the NBA at that time. They were, what did they cross over in like 75-ish? Yeah. So they weren't, they hadn't been around forever. They were they were good in the ABA, but a different league. Indiana was full of Celtic fans. I think they still have a really good following because of Larry.
When you look back at that time of your life, when NBA was great with those teams in the 80s, talk to me about kind of what Indiana Hoosier basketball meant to you. I know that you kind of are one of those guys that are a little bit of a Hoosier historian of sorts. You didn't just play there. Like, the guys back from the 70s and the 80s. What was the impact of Indiana basketball on Brian Evans and Terre Haute at that time?
So every game was on TV, Channel 4. And I know my dad was going to be watching the games. I think my first real introduction to the game was, you can look this up, Bob. There was a commercial before the telecast would start. It's an old lady mopping like the back hallways of Assembly Hall. Like, just there's all these little corridors, and she's mopping it and breaks into the fight song. And so everybody remembers that. They call her the mop lady. Everybody remembers it. That was the Channel 4 thing. And so I remember that from the very, very beginning. The candy striped pants, they stood out. Nobody else had those. And now you're seeing all kinds of teams try to adopt that and wear those things. And I don't like it. But, they had 4 titles before I ever started watching. And so right around the age of 8 or 9 is the Isaiah years. And, they win that title in 81. And that's right around the time I started really getting into hoops. And so Bloomington's about 45 minutes down the street from Terre Haute. So it's really just in our backyard. And it was easy to become a fan. The truth is, when the Purdue teams were pretty good in the mid 80s, I was just more of me and all my buddies were more basketball junkies. I didn't hate Purdue like I learned to hate them later. I watched a lot of those teams and I enjoyed their brand of basketball. I liked Gene Cady on the sidelines. So it was, and we just had really good basketball in the state. Notre Dame was good at the time. Digger he had good teams. Butler wasn't what it is today, but you had Indiana, Purdue, and Notre Dame. They're all making the tournament every year. And, just really competitive and really good teams, during, those years I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, when you're really falling in love with the game. So there was just good basketball everywhere.
Any certain Indiana player emerge as your favorite back as a kid? Anyone that stands out as for sure your favorite guy?
The first time I would say I had a favorite player, and I think he was everyone's, so this isn't very original, but Steve Alford, it would have been 6, 7, 8, or 5, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, or when Steve was playing at IU. And those are the critical years when you're, when you love the game, and those guys are bigger than life. Anybody on TV just seems, magical or not real to you when you're a kid. And he was so good and just automatic. And, we all wanted to be great shooters in Indiana, and he was the best at that time for sure. So yeah, Steve was awesome to watch. I still kind of pinch myself from time to time. I got a text from him the other day, and I'm like, it's hard to not go back and go, Steve Alford he just sent me a text, and I worshiped this guy when I was a kid, and I try to emulate his free throw shooting in the driveway, and then to go on and know some of these guys, it's hard to believe, really.
Next time he texts you, ask him if the buzzer beater that Illinois Wesleyan dropped on him in 1994 was after the clock. Just ask him. I want to see what he says about that. We'll go back to
so that. 94 in Illinois Wesleyan, there was a buzzer beater, and you guys won?
Yeah, the Titans won at Manchester NCAA tournament. Mark Aubrey hit a buzzer beater, and Coach Alford did not think that it happened in time, and he may have been right. Now, the next year he came to our place in the Elite Eight, and he got his revenge. He won a big game there. But I'd like to know if he thinks that shot was still late all these years later.
I'll check on that.
Let me ask you a little bit. You mentioned you weren't a 5-star recruit. When in your high school career, nowadays, and we'll talk about your daughter's amazing athletic career and the fact that she's just committed to a college program to play volleyball heading into her junior year. But nowadays you got kids playing all these AAU games and getting talked to as freshmen and sophomores and certainly juniors. When did the first colleges start knocking on your door, showing up at your games?
Back then I don't know that they were coming to games. I think the first school I got a letter in the mail, and you don't forget the first letter, the first contact, and mine was Western Illinois, the Leathernecks.
The Leathernecks, absolutely.
They sent me a letter, and I don't know where it is, but I should, because that was a big deal. Like when you're a kid in Indiana and all you're doing is hooping, and
I can take you to
spending all
Macomb.
your time in the
You would
driveway.
like Macomb.
I mean,
You'd have a good time.
That's right. It's just a big deal to get a letter for anybody to acknowledge that you played basketball. That was kind of cool that first time. And then University of Evansville started coming around, and their coach, Jim Cruz, who was he's a normal Illinois guy, went on to play for Bob Knight, was on the title team, undefeated team in '76, and on staff for, 10 or 12 years before he took the Evansville job. He recruited me pretty hard and came around a lot, and I liked him. And had I not gotten the offer from Indiana, it would have been really tough to tell him no, because he for sure he worked the hardest at recruiting me. Coach Knight did not have to do that, but Jimmy Cruz, I think, started towards the end of my sophomore year was the first time I got a letter, and Evansville kind of started coming around a little bit more. But really, the beginning of your junior year was what was normal for me. It's all different now. I don't, the rules have changed through the years. I mean, guys were committing as 7th and 8th graders, and that makes no sense. I mean, these guys, you're at that age, you've never been on a campus, you don't know anything, but you can't, it's the rules, right? You can't blame the kids and you can't blame the schools, because somebody else is going to try to get a commitment from a young kid if you don't. So I think they all just have to play the game, the way the rules are. But yeah, I wasn't a big recruit by any means, and I got enough attention. We just thought it was a big deal at that time from where we were from, just getting any attention from a school seemed like a big deal.
So how did things play out with Indiana then? I mean, they get in the mix when, and were they all over you, or was it a we'd like you to come, or like how did the recruiting with the Hoosiers play out, and how did you
Okay,
then end up picking?
Yeah, I could tell you the entire story in the next 5 minutes, and not leave anything out. It's it wasn't a lot of recruiting, let me tell you. So started the senior year, I had a good summer. I played on the same AAU team with who ended up being a future teammate, Alan Henderson, who was for sure a 5-star, top 5 in the country recruit. And that same year as the Fab Five. So like Glenn Robinson, Chris Webber, Allen, Jalen Rose. I mean, that was the top 5. Juwan Howard. I mean, that was the top 5 in our class, and Allen was certainly in it. So I was on the same AAU team as him. And so I got a lot of exposure that summer just from being on his team. So a lot of coaches, sitting around watching him play. I think we went to the national AAU tournament in Arkansas, and you knew all the teams were there. I never saw Coach Knight there, but I remember seeing Indiana, staff guys were there. And so for me, it was like, I got nothing to lose, right? They're not interested in somebody like me, but I know they're watching. And so I had a good summer. I was improving a lot at that time, and still growing and maturing and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have any reason to think they were interested in me. But when senior year started, a couple bigger schools had come along. Wake Forest was one, and the University of Florida. Those were the 2 schools they never formally offered. I think they were going to, and I would have gone to one of them. If I had to guess, I would have gone to Wake Forest, just because I wanted to be in the best conference I could be in, on the biggest stage I could be on, and I'm sure that would have been Wake. But the way it unfolded was, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks before the national letter of intent, like signing day, one of Coach Knight's assistants had reached out to my high school coach and said, he was going to come over and watch, the assistant, Ron Felling, who another Illinois guy, Lawrenceville guy, Hall of Fame coach from Lawrenceville.
I had beers with Ron Felling at Schooners in Bloomington, Illinois, with Coach Scott Trost. I'd just like to throw out that little side note. Had a couple cocktails there. Good guy.
Wow, he is a ton of fun. I'm guessing you were listening that night.
I was listening.
Because he's got more stories than anybody I've ever
I was listening for a long time. Great dude.
Yeah, he's the best. I just saw him. He's doing great. He's in Bloomington. He lives there again. I just went down and spent a few hours with him at his Elks Lodge, or his
nice
VFW post, wherever he holds up. He took me on a little tour, and we had a great time. He's the best. So he's very instrumental in my getting to Bloomington. So he came down, and he knew my high school coach, Pat Rady, who apparently was telling him, hey, the kid keeps getting better. He's getting better. Come and give him another look. And Felling was like, look, I've seen him all summer. I really like him, but he's just, Coach Knight's not going to go for that. He goes, I just don't think I can get him over there to see him. So Felling came in and watched an open gym, and our open gym during, the football season was, most of our guys, our good players, played football. So it was a pretty raggedy group of guys, me and maybe a couple others that were varsity guys. And then it dropped off really fast. And so he came and watched, and I remember it was a Tuesday, and he said, hey, when I got done working out, he said, Coach Knight's going to come tomorrow and watch you play. And looking back, I should have been really nervous about that. I don't really think I was. It was almost like I had nothing to lose, right? I never expected him to recruit me, so there was no pressure on me. I didn't think, and I was excited. So he came and watched me. He came into our gym, and he, again, kind of a raggedy group of guys, but he just said, hey, go. He didn't even say hello and shake my hand. He just came in and goes, why don't you go over on that side basket and shoot and rebound for yourself for a few minutes? So I did, and I'm getting a shot up, and then getting a rebound, spinning the ball out and going and taking a shot for like 5 minutes. And then he called me back over, and he said, why don't you put together a little game of 3-on-3 with, the best 5 guys? And I did, right in front of him for about 10 minutes. And then he said, hey, set up a game of 5-on-5. And we did that. He did not want to watch that. It was ugly. There was just no level of play. It was terrible. And he didn't even want to watch that. So he just said, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And so he and I went into my high school coach, his office, and sat down. So it was just, now I'm sitting across the desk from Bob Knight, door shut, just he and I, which, again, I'm dead serious. I was looking at this like, hey, I'm going to have, I got a great story to tell here. This is, I can't believe I got good enough to, at this game, to just even meet this guy, but I 100% didn't think he was going to recruit me. And so we sit down, and this is the whole story. This is every word that he said. So he sits down and he says, "Now, Coach Rady tells me that you are going to go visit Wake Forest. Is that right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Wake Forest." Now, I was aware they had a golf team, but I wasn't aware they played basketball there. And I wasn't at age, I think I just turned 17 like the month before. And I didn't have a good enough sense of humor to laugh at that. I didn't know what to do. And I just sat there. And he said, "And Coach Rady says you're going to go visit the University of Florida. Is that right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "Florida. I know they have a football team, but I wasn't aware they played basketball." I don't laugh again. And then he said, "Hey, would you and your father like to come over and watch a football game this weekend in Bloomington?" I said, "Yes, sir." So I just said, "Yes, sir," 3 times. That's it. And he got up and left. So that's Saturday. My dad and I drive over to Bloomington, and we go to Assembly Hall. And they got an assistant coach waiting for us, takes us down to the locker room and lets us in and says, "Coach and I will be in a few minutes." So I look at my dad, and I got to tell you, my dad, he never looked intimidated in his life. He always kind of a cool breeze. And my dad looked scared. And I could look at my dad and go, he does not look right. And that's kind of scared me. I'm like, why is my dad is nervous about meeting this guy? But it was really cool. So we're in the locker room, just my dad and I, and we're looking around and we're seeing, so what they have is in every locker, they have all the names in order of, and the last name and the jersey number, whoever's had that locker. And on the outside of the locker, it's the current player. And we're just buzzing around like schoolgirls. And they were like, "Look, here's Alford, here's Randy Whitman." And we're running around looking at this. And again, I can't emphasize enough. I mean, this was just a cool story. I mean, if I didn't end up there, I'd still be telling the story. That's how cool this was. And so he walks in, and there's 2 folding chairs across from one folding chair. And he introduces himself to my dad and not to me again. And we sit down. So I'm sitting next to my dad, right across from Coach Knight. He's right in our face. And this is all he said. And then when I get done saying this, you will have heard every word in my recruiting process, if that's what you want to call it. He says, "Now, I don't know why Brian Evans would want to play anywhere other than Indiana University. What do you think about that?" I kind of nodded my head, and he goes, "Indiana University doesn't want Brian Evans playing anywhere except right here. What do you think about that?" I kind of nodded my head, and he stuck out his hand, shook my hand, and said, "Now, you do realize that playing for me is going to be the hardest goddamn thing you ever do in your entire life. You understand that?" And I nodded my head, and he says, "Why don't you guys go enjoy the football game?" So that was it. That's all he said. And we got up and left. We stayed for like half the football game. And my dad at halftime was like, "Hey, you want to get out of here?" And I said, "Yeah." And I got to tell you, I got an older sister who's 1 grade ahead of me, 1 year ahead of me in school, who had just gone through the recruiting process the previous fall, and it was playing basketball at Duke. She chose Duke over Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, IU, Purdue, and she picked Duke. But she really went through the recruiting process and went on official visits. She did the whole thing, visits to the house. So, I remember these teams coming, and like Muffet and McGraw came and visited at the living room. And, I kind of eavesdropped from the steps. None of this happened. None of this happened for me. And so we get home, and we're about halfway home from Bloomington. And my dad looks over and goes, "Now, is that a verbal commitment?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know." And so I get home, and it's only about 2 p.m. on Saturday. And I call B Trav, And I said, hey, you got to come down here. So he used to just jog down to my house about a half mile away. He comes down. We're shooting hoops in the front yard. We'll call it 2:30 in the afternoon. And I said, hey, man, I got to tell you something. You're not going to believe this. And he's like, what? I said, I think I just committed to play at Indiana University. And he goes, get the hell out of here. And just said, that's bullshit. You're bullshit, man. I was like, no, I'm serious. I think I just committed to play for Coach Knight.
But you weren't exactly sure because there wasn't a lot of paperwork or anything. It was just.
I wasn't sure. And so then I went to, I'll tell you when I knew. I didn't have anybody else to tell. I mean, back then it wasn't like a press conference.
No Instagram, Twitter.
I was a half-star recruit, Bob. So I'm in class on Monday. It was like fifth or sixth period. I remember that. And there was a knock at the door, and it was my high school coach. And he opens the door, he tries to get me out of class, and I could just tell he's frantic. He's kind of jumping around, popping around. He's all excited. And I go out in the hallway and shut the door, and he's like, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me you committed to go to IU? And that's when I actually knew that I was going.
When you knew that you had the offer and that you accepted.
Well, they called him and said, hey, this is exciting. And, kind of telling him, we'll send the national letter of intent paperwork via FedEx and blah, blah, blah. And my coach he just went through the roof. And he goes, hey, this kid didn't even tell me because I didn't know. I suspected it, but I really didn't know. And so that's the whole story. And if you ask Coach Knight, and somebody did, I was with him on a golf trip. This is probably 15 years ago. And somebody said, hey, Coach, it was actually Jay Billis. I used to travel and go to this golf trip that I'd go on. And he's fantastic, by the way, talking to, he's just a great dude. Jay says, hey, Coach, at dinner, why don't you tell the story of recruiting Brian? And everyone kind of is like, oh, geez, because Coach's stories tend to be really long and drawn out and like chew up a whole dinner. So everyone was kind of like, Jay, I don't know if anybody wants to hear that story. And Coach Knight, this is a quote. He says, I'll tell you the story of recruiting Brian Evans. Half a tank of gas to Terre Haute. There's your effing story. And that was it. And he's right. He came over one time and, hung out for a half an hour. And then that was it. Never called my house. My mom didn't meet him. They didn't invite me to campus to do a official visit to meet the team. I never met the team. I just showed up the following fall,
That's great. Now, let me ask, well, first of all, here's how it turned out. I want to get into a lot of the aspects of your career. I'm not just breezing by it, but I just want to give people some context here, different little factoids. You're the first Indiana player that played for Bobby Knight. You were the first to lead the Big Ten in scoring. That wasn't something a lot of Hoosiers did in that system. One of 12 Hoosiers to win Big Ten Player of the Year. You're in the IU Hall of Fame. You're all-time Indiana number 12 in points scored. You were an NBA first-round pick. Your senior year, 21.2 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 39% on 3 and made 62 of them. So like high volume shooter, 39%, career 41% 3-point shooter, which is ridiculous. 1,701 points, 750 rebounds. Going into that, I guess I want to get into Bobby Knight here. You talked about the unique recruiting process, but what did you think of him? Because we're a couple of years apart. So we were watching the same games as kids, I remember seeing that chair fly across the floor, right? Like you remember that very well.
Oh, yeah.
You know where you were when you saw that chair flying, right?
Yep.
The sweater.
100%.
So he was a very polarizing guy in sports. I think you were he was a hard ass and that's the way it should be. And that's old school and that's awesome. Or this guy's a jerk and he doesn't treat people well and they ought to run him out. Like, where were you on Coach Knight, at this time that you just sort of like accidentally committed to the Hoosiers? Like, where were you on Bobby Knight at that point?
I was just just a diehard fan, really. Same as with Larry Bird, I just loved the guy and, didn't know him, and he's not perfect. But but he didn't care about that stuff. You know, when we were kids, that guy was such an iconic image, right? Like I was just watching the games, and he was one of the very, very few guys that you looked and you paid attention to the coach as much as you paid attention to the game. And that was unique. I can't think of other coaches that I felt that way about, but you watched him. There was something about him. And he was so famous in Indiana, like, you know, it was like Bob Barker. You know, every day Bob Barker's on TV. My mom always had it on when I was a kid, and I'm watching The Price is Right. I mean, Bobby Knight was kind of like that. It's like he was always on. He had commercials. He was always on TV. He was always in your face. The book that came out, The Season on the Brink, was, you know, that came out in like 87 and 88. So I was in high school, a freshman, sophomore in high school, and I read the book. And I don't know if you've ever read it, but there's you feel like you know him a little bit when you get done reading the book, because Feinstein was there, and I mean, he did a good job with it. When you're a kid in high school, you've heard all those words, right? Now, they weren't directed at you, and they weren't right here when you were hearing them. I was so excited thinking I was going to get to run out to that court in that uniform. I guess it just was a huge challenge. You know, I wasn't supposed to go in there. I didn't have anything to lose, really. I was either going to be on the team and sitting there and watching good basketball, or I was going to bust my butt and find a way to get on the court and play. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried about him cursing none of that stuff factored in. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, first and foremost. And I just want to take advantage of it.
When you got there, and this is something that I think a lot of young hoopers that are, getting ready to head to campus in August, September as freshmen, or maybe they're going to be sophomores and they didn't play as freshmen. But I'd love to understand when you got there, because you were not the 5-star recruit. You were kind of one of their late additions to the recruiting class, and you were someone they were hoping was going to be a good player, but certainly not a sure thing. You redshirted your first year there. So in 91, 92, you redshirted. You played 93, 94, 95, 96. But when you got there, what did Coach Knight tell you? What was his direction to you as a player, and what you needed to do? And how did he instruct you right, early on that, like, freshman year?
So you don't really get a dose of him. I want to say that we had like one meeting that he was in town for, a couple weeks into school. But he would do a lot of travel that time of year and fish and hunt, all the things that he liked to do. I think really just gearing himself up for the season. And he traveled quite a bit. I think he had speaking engagements. So he wasn't on campus all the time, but he addressed the team one time. And I remember that very well, because I want to say we'd be there like 3:00, and which was a typical, like, when we get there for practice. So we had like a 3 p.m. team meeting in the locker room. Alan Henderson and I were roommates. He had a car on campus. So I want to say at like 2:30, we left our dorm and got to Assembly Hall and walked in the locker room at 2:45. And we walk in the locker room and look around, and everyone's already there. We're the last 2 guys to arrive. And my locker was a big L-shaped locker, and I was at the end of the locker room, so I could see all my locker was right next to the dry erase board, which was didn't turn out to be a great location with regards to Coach Knight, but I could see the whole team. And I just remember looking down the row, and I saw these guys that I still didn't know these guys really. And Calbert Cheney's in there, an All-American. Eric Anderson's in there. It was a really good team. But all these guys were like sitting with their hands on their knees, like sitting straight up, looking straight ahead. 15 minutes before he was coming in, and my locker was right next to Coach Knight's son, Pat Knight. And he looked at me and was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Dude, you guys are almost late." I was like, "Almost late? How? We're not almost late." He goes, "Dude, don't ever show up 15 minutes early. You got to get here before that." And I was like, "Oh shit, this is serious." It was just one of those moments. I was like, "Oh boy, what did I get myself into here?" So he came in, and just kind of scared everybody to, he's just like, here's how hard we're going to work. Here's what your preseason conditioning is going to be. If we want to win, it's got to be the hardest it's ever been. Let's have the hardest preseason conditioning. Are we going to commit to that, guys? Do we want it to be the hardest that we've ever done? Because if we don't, then what are we here for? And it was, by the time we walked out, it was like, this is going to be really, really difficult. But I would tell you, to answer your question about what did he tell me? Nothing. Hang on one second, Bob. We got a dog that wants to go outside, and I got kids that aren't. Hang on for me 1 second.
Absolutely. And we're back. The dog's been taken care of. This is very on the fly podcast. It's beautiful.
So here's where he was great. I mean, you always knew where you stood. I mean, people ask me about him all the time, and I could say so many different things. I had a great experience. Was not designed to be easy, for sure. I mean, a coach was not your dad on campus, not your buddy, not what he was trying to be. But you did know where you stood. Like, so anybody that's not playing knows exactly why they're not playing. And in my case, that first year, he gave me he gave me an option if I wanted to redshirt. I started having. I mean, at first it was very difficult for me. I don't think I looked very good. Once we got through preseason, I started settling in. The game started slowing down a little bit for me, and I was at that time. I could shoot the ball if I was open. I just wasn't getting open. I didn't know how to get open in his offense, and I started showing some promise, I think, and he started thinking, "Hey, maybe I have something here with this guy." He definitely. I was still growing. I was a young freshman, so I was still 17. First couple months I was there. We were a good team. Didn't really need me. We were pretty loaded in the front court. So I mean, it was it was perfect for me to say, yes, I want the redshirt year. And I did want it. I wanted to play for 4 years. I don't know if I would have been able to play on that team at all. But then when I started playing for him, he just made it really clear. So like that next season, it was, hey, if you want to get on the court, here's what you need to do. You need to rebound the basketball because we need rebounding. You're good. You need to rebound the basketball, and you need to get Calvert Chaney open. You need to set screens for Calvert Chaney. And when you do, his guy is going to fight over the screen and follow him. And your guy's probably going to go with him too. And you're going to be standing there by yourself, and you can make shots. He goes, so screen for Calvert Chaney and rebound the basketball. And that was it. I mean, it was, he just, I didn't have to do everything. He wanted me to do those two things. As much of a dummy as I am, that's all I tried to do. I just was like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to rebound, and I'm going to set screens for Calvert Chaney. And dude played me from day one. I mean, I always played, starting my freshman year, maybe 15, 20 minutes a game. But later in that season, I was playing, 30 minutes a game, 35 minutes a game down the stretch when it mattered. And I just always listened to what he had to say. I mean, as silly as that sounds, I mean, he's a basketball genius. And so at times he was really tough on me, but for the most part, I always played and I just tried to get better. And I didn't really offer any resistance to what he was teaching. If he said, hey, go do this, I just do it.
He really simplified things for you, didn't he? Like he really simplified it. I think that's what's cool is how simple he made it for you. And, you ended up being the guy as a senior. But here's a freshman, it's real simple as rebound and set screens for Calvert Chaney, right? He really just, everyone starts as a role player. Most players start as a role player. Some walk in and they're the guy. But I think that's kind of where I was going with that is, did he help you in terms of defining your role when you were a freshman? And that's very specific.
Yeah, you can't beat that. I struggle in life when I don't know where I stand. Like, it was so good for me and my personality to just know here's why you're in the doghouse. You're doing these are the things you're doing wrong. There's nobody better than just kind of leveling you up every single day. He was the best at it. If there's ever you guys, calling home and complaining like I don't know why I don't play, that's BS. Right. Everybody knew why they weren't playing or why they were playing. We all knew.
Just a couple more questions on Coach Knight. He's known as just for incredible preparation, like just game prep, being ready for the opponent, but having his team ready. Is that something that's legit? Just talk through like him as a X's and O's guys, and is he really the preparer that everyone says he was?
Oh man. We were convinced that he didn't sleep, for whatever that means. I mean, I'm being serious. We had honest discussions in our locker room, wondering how and if he ever slept, because he would reference all the things he was doing, preparing for a game or for the next game. And, he mid-season, he started looking like crap because he wasn't taking great care of himself. I read this similar story about Coach K when this last season ended. If you haven't read that story or that article, you got to read it. It was fantastic. But they were kind of documenting how throughout the season he starts looking just cruddier and cruddier because they're just putting so much into it. And I know where he got it from, where Coach K got it from. Just preparing all the time. Like he would call me in, and you never want to get called in. I mean, 1 out of 10 times it was like a positive session, but you'd never wanted to get called in to see him. And you'd get that call at your apartment, and it'd be his secretary, Mary Ann, and she was the nicest lady in the world. It was always tough because the nicest lady in the world was like, "Hi, Brian." I'm like, "Hello." She's like, "Coach wants to see you." But I'd go in to see him, and he would have this doesn't sound like a big deal now because of technology, but back then, just the fact that they had game tapes of, recorded tapes, VHS tapes of teams we're going to play, and we'd watch their last like 4 games, would be a part of our prep. But he would have specific tapes made just about me. And I remember thinking, God, how much time is this guy spending on me? Why does he have a tape? And this typically a low light reel from like the day before practice, a low light reel of me, and then we'd have to watch it together. And it would be like, "This is you yesterday. Can you believe this? Look at this. This is you yesterday. We play Purdue this Saturday, and this is you. This is how you're getting ready for the game. Yeah. Here's a missed block out. Here's a turnover." And we just watch this tape. He'd start it over. We watch it again. And I don't even know how many times he watched it before I came in there. But he was always, the preparation was insane. I'll give you a good story about our preparation. So the Fab Five, this had been their sophomore year, my redshirt freshman year. Right. They're coming to town. We were ranked number 1, undefeated in the Big Ten at like 11 or 12-0. They weren't going to beat us. They couldn't win the league title. We'd already kind of run away with it. But they were ranked like 3rd or 4th in the country, something like that. And it was a huge game. It was a big,
right.
It was, I want to say we played them on Valentine's Day in '93. And the game will pop on the Big Ten Network all the time, and people will text me, "Hey, it's on again." It was just a really great game. I had a good game as a freshman and made some free throws at the end to close it out. But before that game, like Coach he prepared for everybody. He always wanted us to think he was preparing the same. And for the most part, he did. We could be playing Appalachian State and going through the same, game prep that we would do later in the season. But every so often, a Purdue game or a game like this, you could feel it a little different. I'll give you an example. So 2 days before the game, we start watching, like we're worried about us up until then. And now 2 days before, we're going to start prepping for that game, that team, their offense and everything they like to do. And we go in the locker room. So practice is over. We'd go in the locker room. We'd watch, 20, 30 minutes of film with whichever coach was in charge of that game. And we'd come out, we'd walk through all of their sets, the stuff that they like to do, right? Just a typical walkthrough. Well, for this game, we go in the locker room and we watch one play. And we walk back, we have our notebooks. We had to carry notebooks with us all the time on the road, or anytime he was talking to us in the locker room, we all had these red notebooks that we're supposed to be either writing in or fake writing in or pretending to write in. And I wish I would have written more about what he was saying at the time, but you just got tired of doing that stuff. But for this particular game, we watched one play, carry our notebooks out onto the court, walk through the play, walk back in the locker room, sit down, watch another play. and did that for about an hour and a half, back and forth. And you're just dying. I mean, we're tired. We just want to go home. We want to go eat. And we're like, never have we prepped like this, like each and every play. We did that like 3 days in a row. And I just remember in the first 5 minutes of that game, I was guarding Juwan Howard, and they came down the court. Jalen's got I just remember this vividly. We're in Assembly Hall. Jalen's got the ball at the top. He holds up like a fist. He's calling a play, and Juwan's kind of moving around. He was on the sideline, and I'm like, hey man, you gotta go to the elbow. And he looked at me like,
run his play.
Yeah, he looked at me like, and then he was like, oh shit, these guys know our plays better than we do. And we did. We knew all their stuff.
That's awesome.
You think about that psychological edge,
right,
for those guys, because I don't know if they really knew their plays or not, but we knew them. We knew them really well, and it was funny. I mean, I think about that because that's how well prepared we were every game.
Yeah, that freshman year, your redshirt freshman year, the team was awesome. You guys were rated number 1 for, I think, most of the season. I think preseason and most of the season. That was, so just so folks can remember, that was Calbert Cheney, Greg Graham, Matt Nover, Damon Bailey, Alan Henderson, Brian Evans coming off the bench, playing good minutes, really good minutes. I don't know if you were the 6th man somewhere, but you were playing good minutes. That team lost a heartbreaker. I think it was the regional final to Kansas. It was definitely to Kansas, right? It was in St. Louis. Was that to get to the Final Four?
Yeah, that was Final 8 game.
What do you remember?
That was the year Alan Henderson blew out his knee in the late Big Ten season. Probably, I think we were 13 or 14-0 when he hurt his knee, and it was devastating. It was one of the darkest days, in Bloomington of all time. I mean, that team had all the ingredients to go win, or at least to challenge for it. What we lost was huge. I mean, Alan was somehow he's still somewhat underrated in my mind, just so steady. I mean, he's so much better than anybody on their team right now. I mean, they've got this Trace Jackson Davis, who's a solid player and kind of a third, maybe an all Big Ten kind of guy. I mean, if Alan was on that team right now, he'd be the best player in the league by far. Yeah. Times have changed. But losing him was huge. He was a sneaky good post defender, help side defender. He had 6'9" with some length. He was just a world-class rebounder, all-time leading rebounder in IU's history. When we lost him, it was more, I kind of slid into a spot, and I played more minutes and started and all that kind of stuff. But we were so different. And his size and his interior presence is really what we lost. And in Kansas that year, that was a horrible matchup for us because they were really long. They had Ostertag, and they just had a lot of length. And so me being more of a perimeter guy, the loss of Allen just really killed us. And if it wasn't for matching up with them, I still think we would have run the table. That was just a bad beat for us.
I got to believe that, playing at Assembly Hall with as passionate as fans are, that play was packed all the time that season, every season while you were there. I mean, it had to prepare you pretty well for the tournament. You get into a game like that against Kansas and St. Louis. I got to believe that at that point, you guys weren't intimidated by playing in front of a huge crowd or the moment, because most of your games you were playing in the moment there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, we were groomed, man. I mean, we played Kansas in the RCA Dome that year. We always played Kentucky, either in Freedom Hall or the RCA Dome. So we played in way bigger venues than even, Assembly Hall. And we played, it was always a packed house, like you said. I mean, I look back and when I go down to games now, it blows my mind. I mean, half the time the balcony's not open. I mean, it's very obvious how far we've fallen off and how different the team. It was just still great fans, but there was never a seat. I mean, there was never a seat. We'd come out for our, whatever they call it, Hoosier Hysteria, Midnight Madness, packed. If it was free, it was packed. And so we were spoiled by that. I mean, we played in front of the best fans and always a sold out building, and, really, really cool thinking back that, here I got pretty lucky to end up there and just to play in front of the fans that we have and still get remembered by them. It's crazy. It really is.
And just to close the loop on Coach Knight, I just wanted to ask, are there misconceptions? People have an impression from what they see on TV on the court. I mentioned the throwing of the chair was an iconic moment that people think of, and him kind of getting in people's faces. But like off the court, no cameras around, things that no one saw. Are there things that would help put Coach Knight in a different light for people?
Oh, I don't know. He's a polarizing figure. You said that earlier. Everyone has an opinion of him that either it's made by the media or by something that he did on tape. And the cool thing is that's who he was. I mean, he didn't change. He never decorated it. I mean, that was him. So if you saw him at a press conference and he was mad as hell, then he's mad as hell.
Right.
If we had a bad practice, he's just mad as hell. And you've never seen anyone that mad in your life. He wanted us to play a certain way, and we were either going to do it or he was going to be mad as hell. And I love the experience. It was so great playing for him. I'd do it all over again. If he was still coaching today and my son was, good enough to play for him, I'd demand that he played for him. I wouldn't even give him a choice to go somewhere else, because I know all the other things he would get out of that would prep him for the rest of his life. And it's not that bad. What's the guy going to do to you?
Right.
That's kind of when I turn the corner, as a player, just going, this guy's a basketball genius. That's obvious, and I could tell you a million stories about being in the NBA and, with good coaches. I'm not going to throw any of them under the bus, but you could go look and see who I played for. I could not believe these guys at timeouts. I mean, I never had a coach again. Calipari was one of my coaches. I never had anybody that compared. He was so good at timeouts that it spoiled the rest of my life in basketball. I was playing overseas. It didn't matter who I was playing for. I'm like, this guy's a chop. Whoever it was is a chop, because he could just get a basket or get us a layup or just a wide open shot, whoever he wanted to get the shot. And I don't think I ever saw him diagram the same play twice. I mean, we ran a motion offense, which is, again, what coach, he's known as being like this stranglehold kind of guy, right? Like Coach Knight is dominating. It's not really true. I mean, he ran an offense that he just had principles in place and let us do whatever we wanted to do. Think about that. And everyone kind of confuses him as a control freak. He loves the element of surprise. I think that's part of his military background is, late game situation, other team gets a bucket, there's 10 seconds left. He didn't call a timeout. All these guys that are, they have to control these coaches that think that, they're so great with a clipboard. When you watch basketball now, tell me it doesn't drive you crazy. Timeout. Right. That dude was like, go, get the ball out and bring it up and run our offense. The same stuff that we've been running the whole game, running it again, run it in a different way. But, we had unpredictable patterns, that we just were reading the defense, and pretty cool. I mean, I love that. Nobody does it. And it worked for him so well for so many years. I can't believe when I watch it, and the coaches that have followed him are some of the most play calling fools you've ever seen. They can't wait to call a play. And I love that we were prepared for the other team's offense, and nobody could really prepare for ours, which was pretty neat.
There is a D3 program in New York City, in Manhattan, or I should say Washington Heights Yeshiva. It's an Orthodox Jewish school. They've become a powerhouse D3 school. They're trying to run Indiana's Bobby Knight motion offense. It's pretty cool to watch. Like there's a lot of video on it. They have perfected it. It's hard to guard because you're not telling, Juwan Howard that he should be at the elbow. I mean, these guys are making reads and cuts, and it's pure basketball. It's great stuff. wanted to ask you a couple more things. I know that, time wise, I want to be respectful of your time, but you became a great player at Indiana. So Big Ten Player of the Year in '96. When was it you started thinking to yourself, maybe they're going to want me to play in the NBA? Maybe I'm good enough to play at the next level. Was that your junior year? Start thinking of that, your sophomore year, senior? When did that become a thing for you?
It was always a thing for me. It wasn't something I could tell. I was smart enough to not tell other people. But I've always believed I could try to find a way to play. And I was just improving, I had a 5-year window. I was trying to improve every day. It was really cool that I got to see after my freshman year, Eric didn't get drafted, but played 2 years for the Knicks. And that helped me, right? To just when you can see somebody that you played against and he's playing, I said, well, I'm not that far away. I got a long way to go, but it's not crazy for me to think that. And then the next year, Calvert was at the 6th pick in the draft, and Greg Graham was like the 15th or 16th pick. So now I got another year under my belt. I knew these guys really well. I was no Calvert Chaney at that time, but to see those guys go on to the next level, I think always fed me, plenty of fuel for the summer. Like, hey, I got to make a jump. I got to work hard and make a huge jump. And coaches, everyone heard him say this. He said this a lot of different times. He said to me, you have the most inflated opinion of your athletic ability of anybody I've ever seen in my life, which I thought was great. I loved it. Because it's like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm not going to win a foot race. I'm not going to win a jumping contest. But I'm not going to go around and hang my head and act like I suck. So I always just try to have like a little bit of a moxie about me. Like, I'm pretty good. Not ego, I don't think the wrong way, but just, I believed in myself, and he could sense that. He loved it. He just blew me a lot of shit for it.
Right. When you got to Orlando, so they take you in the first round, and you got there at an interesting time because you had Shaq who had been there, and Penny, and so you had that incredible little nucleus going on. And was Horace Grant there then? He was done with his Bulls time? He was there, but I think between the time you got drafted and the time you got there, is that when they lost Shaq via free agency to the Lakers? Is that right in that window of time? Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So they drafted me, late June. I was in Orlando and I had hurt my shoulder. So I was down there getting ready to get surgery on my shoulder. And so 2 weeks after the draft is when, this all unfolded. And the way I remember, they did that recently. They did a 30 for 30 on it, but he went from, I want to say they offered him like $70 or $80 million, which was huge at that time. I mean, it was the biggest offer.
Right.
It might have been 100. I don't know. Right. And then the next day, Jerry West added like 2 years to the deal, and it was like 130 million. And then the next day, the Magic came back with a new and improved offer that was a little bit more than LA, but I think the damage was done, and he was insulted by the first offer when he was already, I think, toying with the whole Hollywood thing, and he was young, and he was in all that. So kind of the LA thing, I think, was reeling him in. The fact that Wilt had played there and Jabbar had played there, I think it made sense for him. He's quick to say, if you could watch the 30 for 30, he regrets it. He was in a good spot, and I think he realizes that he set that franchise back a long way when he left. But I do think that they botched it up on the first day of free agency, unfortunately. And it killed me. I mean, it's not sour grapes to me anymore, but they drafted me because of him. They were trying to fill up the perimeter with guys that can make shots, and that was who I was at that time. And I had a really cool story. And I sound like a punk. I'm going to tell me and Jerry West story. So here it comes, me and the logo. I went out and visited them before the draft, and he really liked me. And I worked out for him, and I had lunch with he and Mitch Kupchak in the Forum, like in the old Forum, which I hate. You remember, as a Celtics fan, I hated him. And I really did not want to get drafted. That's how childish and immature I was, even at age 21 or 2. I did not want to be drafted by the Lakers because I'm an idiot, obviously. And Jerry was awesome to me. I mean, just Mr. West. I shouldn't even call him Jerry. He was so nice to me. The first time that we played there, I was on the injured list with a shoulder recovering, and he called me over, and I couldn't believe he was going to talk to me again. But I mean, I really had a nice lunch with him, and he was great. I thought I connected with him, and he just seemed like an Indiana guy to me. And he said, "Hey, I just want to tell you a story." He goes, "First off, you can play in this league. Don't think for a second you can't play in this league." He goes, "You don't know how close you were to being a Laker. Now, if you gave me a do-over, I would have said that day, hey, trade a half-eaten hot dog from last season for me. I mean, bring me to LA now."
Right.
Like if I'd have known then what I know now, I would have begged him to get me there because he liked me that much. And that's what you need. You know, you need a general manager. You need somebody powerful like him that believes in you. That's a big deal. And I don't think I quite understood that at the time, but he said the night of the draft, he goes, "Here's how it went down." And because I was sitting at Nick's English Hut, our favorite spot in Bloomington for the draft, and the waiter kept coming over. This is how long ago it is. No cell phones. The waiter at Nick's kept coming over going, "Hey, the Lakers just called again. They just want to make sure they know you're here. They want to make sure you're here. 15th pick, 17th pick. The Lakers want to know you're here." And I'm going, "Oh my God, I want to be a Laker. You got to be kidding me." They had the 24th pick. I ended up going 27th. 24th pick, Derek Fisher from Arkansas Little Rock. And it was a guy that honestly I didn't know his name at that time. It wasn't like it is now. I think there's just so much more hype. Right. There's still some hidden small school guys. A lot of guys that were being drafted were foreign. Ilgauskas and Potapenko and a bunch of guys that got drafted ahead of me, we'd never heard of because there was no international scouting that you ever read about. And so they picked Derek, and then the Magic picked me. I hadn't worked out for Orlando, but what Jerry said to me, he goes, "So here was the deal." He goes, yes, we have a war room, and yes, I have other people that are contributing and scouts. He said, but that draft was all me. And he goes, and I went off my own gut instincts. If I thought I was going to get Shaq, I was picking Brian Evans. And if I didn't think I was going to get him as a free agent, I was going Derek Fisher and try to develop a point guard. So when he made the pick, he did not think he was going to get Shaq. That's what he called me over to tell me.
That's crazy.
And I should have begged him, and I didn't.
That's crazy.
And then I was in Europe 3 years later.
Well, I'm interested too, because you had a couple different coaches. You started with Brian Hill, and then I think Chuck Daly, your second year coach. And look, I grew up in Chicago, and so when Michael Jordan got drafted, I was just the right age. I was 12 years old in Chicago the day Michael Jordan I saw the whole thing, and I'm leading this up to say I hated Chuck Daly for obvious reasons, right? The Pistons. Did you hate Chuck Daly?
I hated him.
So
I hated the Pistons. I hated the Lakers. I hated Isaiah. So here Isaiah played at my favorite school, and I hated Isaiah because he was a bad boy. I hated those guys.
And so
I was more of a right. So we all love Jordan, right? So Bird is kind of aging out, and my team was the Celts. But we love Michael Jordan. My 7th grade basketball season is when his shoes came out, and I got the Air Jordans, and I was the only guy that had them at the time. And which is, you think about it, how fast things just elapse. Right. I had those shoes in 7th grade. I begged my mom and dad for them. They were $99.99. They were $100 at the Terre Haute Mall, and I had to beg for them. My parents really couldn't afford that, and they did it because I begged them. I told them my foot wasn't going to grow anymore. I was full of it. Anyway, think about how to the psychological advantage that guy had on our era.
Right.
We're against them in the playoffs. I was on the Nets. We were the 8th seed, and they were the 1 seed in 97, 98, and we're doing our pregame prep, and I'm going, I'm going to get switched. I'm going to be in the game and get switched onto him. And we were wearing his shoes in 7th grade. And
crazy.
that's Iverson, that's
Right.
Ray Allen, that's everyone was a huge Jordan fan. He owned all of us. And so it was just the intimidation factor he had, especially in the United Center, the pregame and the running of the Bulls. I mean, that was just the coolest thing ever to be on that court, to see him warming up across from you was just like, holy shit, man, this is the big time. This is it.
When you were playing for Chuck Daly, and I tell you the time that when I started warming up to him, he was phenomenal as the head coach of the Dream Team. Like he was just the right guy. He was just the right guy to do that. How was he as the head coach of the Orlando Magic for Brian Evans? Like how was Chuck Daly to play for?
I mean, I central casting. I mean, for him to be the coach of that team, he managed those jackasses in Detroit that I hated, and he could handle all those personalities. And I mean, he was the perfect guy. I remember hearing, at that time, he's going to coach the Dream Team. And like you said, it made perfect sense. And he was just slick, right? And he was chill. When the Magic basically lured him out of retirement with millions, right? I think he signed a 3-year, $15 million deal or 5-year, whatever it was big money for a coach at that time to get. He was living in Jupiter, Florida, and he was chilling. And he wasn't that old. He was 67, I think, when he took the job. He was just basically like, I got to go take this bag of money, basically. Right. So I don't think I was playing for the old Chuck Daly necessarily. I think he was, and he may have been that way all the time, but he delegated to the staff, and he had to have his hair done a certain way, and he had the slick Armani suit, and he was okay. He was definitely known as a veteran coach, and I was a rookie. And because I missed most of that first season with this injury, it was kind of like a redshirt year. I was there, but I really wasn't there. And, and for me, it sucked because you don't want to have different coaches. I mean, I see these guys that get drafted by us like Sacramento and some of these places, because I know that league too well now. When I see the night of the draft, I'm rooting for certain guys to not go to certain places because there's no stability. And I feel like that's kind of what I had is you don't want the GM job to turn over. You don't want the head coaching job necessarily to turn over when you're a young guy. And I saw a lot of that turnover. It was Brian Hill, then it was Richie Adubato. They fired Brian Hill just because our team, we lost Shaq, and all these guys that were getting all these open looks, they're not getting open looks anymore. And I think that impacted, just the shock waves, and the game just changed for all those guys. And so the finger pointing started, and next thing you know, we ran through a couple coaches. Chuck was a veteran guy and I was a young guy. I ended up playing quite a bit. I ended up getting traded late in that year, but I was playing for him. I didn't really have a problem with him. He used me a lot he's not going to yell at the vets for the most part. He would get on me a lot, and he knew where I played. He honestly thought he was getting on me, and it didn't even register like that. The NBA was so different, and it's such a far cry from Coach Knight on your case every day. It was like, does this guy think he's bothering me? I couldn't even believe it. Like, he never really yelled at me. He was just kind of just busting my chops all the time. It was fine. He was fine. I did not like him, but this was a pretty funny story. So he was getting up there in age, and I think he was starting to battle some of the some dementia stuff. But I came back from Europe. This is like 2 summers later. I came back from Europe, and he had taken a consulting job. He left the Magic and he was consulting for the Grizzlies, I believe, the Memphis Grizzlies. And he came to Summer League, and he was just sitting at half court. And I was probably going to go over and say something to him and just say, hey, coach. And, but I had played for him for half a season or something like that. And somebody comes, and the game's over. I had a decent game in the Summer League, which is not a brand of basketball designed for somebody like me. That was always just a waste of time to go out and play in that thing, because it's not real basketball. And but I'm out there shooting, and I'm sure I'm stroking it around the perimeter, and just in kind of a cool down session. And somebody comes and says, hey, Coach Daly wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I went down and I sat down at the score table next to him, and he said to me, he goes, he looked a little different. And he goes, how are you doing? He goes, I like you. I like you. So where'd you play this last year? I said, I was in Italy, coach. And he goes, you remind me of this guy that I had in Orlando. His name was, what was his name? He goes, Brian Evans. And I said, coach.
Oh, no.
Brian.
Oh, no.
I was that forgettable to him. He forgot about me, but I reminded him of me, which was pretty cool.
At least you stayed consistent enough that
right.
You're the guy.
Yeah, I was the guy. I was like, it is me.
I thought he was going to say like Chris Mullen or something like that, like I could have seen him say that, but
I had a guy I guess you remind me of a guy I had in Orlando
for about half a season.
That was me.
Just a couple more things. There was that 97-98 season when you got traded to the New Jersey Nets. I got wind of a pretty darn funny story about you had to work a player out. When you were with the Magic, they brought in a player who was a kind of a fan favorite back in the 80s, made his name in the dunk contest. He wasn't real tall. I think talk me through the player you were asked to work out and how that played out, because I think this is a good one.
This is the I want to say this is the day before or the day of the trade.
Right.
So I'll cut through the Ronnie cycling, but the team had to trade Ronnie. They had tried to trade him to Utah, and they made a trade, and he didn't. It was about 3 days, a week before the deadline, and he didn't report. He was the first guy ever in pro sports who said, "Yeah, I'm not going," and didn't go. He's like, he was a big city guy. He was either going to go to the New York area or he was going to go back to Miami. This guy was not going to go to Utah, and they tried to trade him there. He didn't show up, so players had to go back to their teams, and everyone knew that a trade was going to happen because the Magic, after that had happened, they had to find a new home for him. And I really didn't want to leave. I was comfortable, and Chuck was playing me. I was playing behind Nick Anderson, but I was stealing some minutes and getting some good time and getting some shots. Like in kind of later game scenarios, we didn't have a really good shooting team. Penny was kind of off and on hurt, and so there were some write-ups in the paper I remember seeing, where I'm like, hey, I'm making it here in this league. Like I was close to just kind of cementing myself in at that time, or at least I felt like I was, because here I'm playing for this veteran guy that everybody respected. He doesn't like young guys, and I'm getting some, looks late in the game, and I was shooting the ball well. So they call me up and they say, hey, we're working a guy out. We're looking at signing to a 10-day contract. Will you just come in it was a day off. Will you come in and work out with him? I said, sure. So I came in, I remember walking in the locker room, and I'm throwing on my gear and I'm lacing up, and in walks Spud Webb. And, I had the poster on my wall, the one that's a long poster with all the frames, where he goes up and he's dunking behind his head. And those dunk contests, that was the coolest. Like I used to love the home run derby. I don't even watch the stuff anymore. I don't watch
the old school dunk contest with Terrence Stansberry and Dominique and Michael.
Best.
And Clyde Drexler, that era.
We love those. We used to tape those and rewatch them. Trav and I over and over. And
Tom
over.
Chambers.
3-point shootout with Bird. Those, like in the late 80s, those were the greatest things in the world. Right. So, Spud walks in, and he'd been out of the league for maybe a year, maybe a year and some change or whatever it was. And I felt not offended because he had a great career, but I thought, how are they going to work he and I out together? So we go on the court, and I'm just thinking, it's just going to be a workout just to see if he's in shape. And, I'm going to shoot, he's going to shoot. We're just going to get a sweat, We go out there, and it's Chuck, and we had Dr. J was on staff because there was a big Philly connection with the staff. So Pat Williams, the president, was from Philly. He had built that team that won in '82. The general manager came from there. John Gabriel was a part of that franchise. There was definitely a Chuck had been there. He had been in Philly for a while, so there was definitely a Philly presence. And they had just named Dr. J the VP of something, president of basketball ops or something like that. So he's sitting there, the whole staff, and they're just sitting in their normal seats on the bench. And in the arena, the lights are on, and it's just me and Spud. And right away, I'm thinking we're going to just get a sweat and stuff. And Chuck's like, hey, play one-on-one, play to 5, make
You
it
and
take
Spud.
it from the top of the key. And I'm, you know, he was so little, you just can't believe it. And he was starting to gray up a little bit. So then he looked kind of like old and little. And
What's you, a 5'5", 4'5'4"? Maybe.
maybe,
So he's a little 5'5" guy. You're a 6'8" small forward.
right.
The one-on-one,
So anyway,
I can't even picture it.
It was weird. It was weird. And I again, I don't want to sound wrong. I felt a little bit offended. Like, nobody else get called in. I'm called in, and now you're going to have me play one-on-one. I'm not going to just chuck 3-pointers.
Like, why not Nick Anderson? Or right. Why did you get to play Spud Webb? That was a strange decision.
That's because of rookie. I mean, it was a rookie because they didn't care if I had a day off, and everybody else they did. So I just ran him over like 3 times in a row.
You just back him down?
I just backed him down and little baby jump hook. And one time he slid into the stanchion. And on the third one, I knocked him down and laid it in. And Chuck said, "Just get out of here," and kicked me out. And so I left and never came back. I went home that night and got traded.
Was it make it take it? Did Spud ever have the ball?
No.
He never had the ball.
I won 3-0 and I got kicked out.
Just backing him in, little left-handed hook in the paint, right?
Little baby jump hook. He couldn't. No, he had nothing.
You got traded to the Nets that night.
Yep,
that's tremendous.
That's the story.
Hey, just we could go on and on. The next time we chat, we can get into Coach Calipari. That would be a whole good saga. But
hey, man. Hey, you got me right now. You fire away, dude.
I would be interested to hear, not so much about playing for John Calipari. I think he was a really young coach at the time, but more later on, and I don't know what year the Indiana job opened, but at some point he wanted the Hoosier job bad, and I think he was lobbying you, hoping that you had some pull or some say. Is that correct? Like, talk us through Coach Calipari lobbying you for the Hoosier job.
Well, I don't know how hard he lobbied me. He had my he managed to get my cell phone number. He's used it maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 25 years, and it was all within like 1 week. And he had my number. And he was just kind of gauging, like, "Hey, what do you think? What are you hearing? Are you hearing anything?" He didn't know our program from the next. So he was just taking a stab at it. Do you talk to? Are you hearing anything? Are they going to call me? Do you think I got a crack at it? I want this job. He was prepared to he wanted the job. There's no doubt about it. And he was just like, "Hey, I'm going to get to a blue blood, and I'm going to win, and I'm going to win huge." And he has. But
he was at Memphis at the time, right? At the time that he was lobbying you, he's probably looking at it like there's a certain level he can get to at Memphis, and he can't get any higher. But boy, if he could get to Indiana, he was looking at that like that would be a pretty sweet combination.
He said at that time it was all about the recruits, and the ones I remember were he said, "I can get Derrick Rose to come to Memphis because of where he's coming from. Like, he's not, he doesn't care about 200-year-old oak trees on the IU campus. That's not what he's coming. He's coming here because I sold him on playing for me and me getting him prepared for the NBA." He goes, "But I cannot get Kyle Singler out of Medford, Oregon, and I can't get Kevin Love out of LA or Oregon, where he's from, I can't get those guys to visit this campus. 70% commuter campus with, train track running through. I can't get those guys. And those are the guys you want. And those were the high school seniors at that time. So this would have been like 07 or 06 when they hired Crean is when he really thought he had a good crack at it. And they didn't want to talk to him. We've had strange leadership for a long period of time. And at that time, everyone was like, we wanted the best of Coach Knight, which was running the clean program and everything else, but we don't want them to act like they own the place. Like, we ran away from a lot of good stuff that now we're circling back going, wait a minute, he wasn't all bad. He was hard to deal with, but he did a lot of things the right way. And so I think we had screwy leadership. I don't know how he would have done. When I played for him in New Jersey, I thought this guy belongs in the college game. And again, you made the point. He was only 40 years old.
Yeah, he was young.
And I look at it now like, he didn't know anything. And he fell into the trap that so many of them do, which is, cater to the highest paid guys and then try to kind of beat on the jack wagons at the end of the bench. And guys reject that stuff, the front running guys reject that stuff too. I mean, the guys that have a ton of success in that league, and this is proven, it's Phil Jackson, it's Jerry Sloan, it's Popovich, it's Spoelstra, Riley, and that kind of guy. And they treat everybody the same. They don't take any shit off the best players. I mean, right. And then the best players have to be coachable for it to turn into a title. And that's where, LeBron's been good at that. He lets himself be coached, I believe. Tim Duncan was the best of all time. I mean, that culture there is a lot less about Popovich and a lot more about Tim Duncan allowing himself to be treated like the 13th man. A lot of the guys, Penny Hardaway is a great example. He wasn't that kind of guy. He wanted special treatment. And that's why, Orlando fell off hard. They just young, immature guys that wanted the wrong things. I'm sure they would agree that they weren't focused like they should have been. And guys have to allow themselves to be coached. Calipari, I felt like, is going to go back to the college game and kill it. And he did. I think now Kentucky fans are going, hey, we've only won one.
Right.
I think they're starting to cry about it a little bit. I don't know what will happen with him, but he was okay. I mean, he was a hype guy. He welcomed me with open arms and really wanted me there. So that trade, they had several scenarios. The Magic had posed several scenarios, and he wanted to make it clear to me. And so did the GM from Orlando. He called me first and he goes, hey, he wanted you. He goes, I want you to know that. He goes, I drafted you. I value you. He goes, in these 4 scenarios, you were in one of them. He selected the one you're in. He goes, I just want you to hear that. This guy really wants you and thinks that you can play. So it was, I went in there with a good attitude, and Cal was fine. He was just kind of a yeller and a screamer and kind of a whiner at the time. I think if he went back to the league now, it'd be a different story.
Talk about overseas. I'd love to get, because this is where the folks that usually tune in on the D3 side, there's very rarely a Division III player that gets drafted. I think the last one was Devin George from Augsburg, who became a great Laker. It's been a long time since Devin George. But a lot of great Division III players, a lot of D3 All-Americans play overseas. Now, there's many different levels overseas, and there's many countries you can play in. But when you went from the NBA to overseas, I guess the message that I'd like to hear from you is it fair to say that the caliber of basketball over there was probably a lot better than you expected when you landed, when you got off the plane? Like, what was the talent like? I think you were playing in Italy. What was that like?
I think the top leagues are and it goes back and forth. I think when I was playing there, that the Italian league, the top league, was the best league, but it was real close. Spain has a good top league. Those are probably the 2 best. Occasionally, there'll be a good team in Turkey or Russia will have a good team, but top to bottom, Italy and Spain are the 2 top leagues for sure. I just, when I went over there, I thought I was dejected. I was pissed. I could have gone to training camp. I took a deal because my agent had told me to really get paid the top dollars overseas, they got to see you play first. You're not going to get it, you're not going to sign without them seeing you up close. You're not going to get their best money. And I had played 3 years. I was disgruntled with Cal. Like I didn't play enough on a bad team, and it killed you. When you're going to a contract year, you're not playing on a bad team. That's bad. That's a bad mix, And part of me was, rusty too. I wasn't playing enough minutes. I kind of wanted to play and just see where I was at, what I need to work on, and also looking, hey, if I go over and play really well, I'm trying to come back to the league. But then if I ever got to go back overseas again, at least I can get paid the right kind of money. That was the mindset. Now, when I got there, I wasn't sure what to expect. I really didn't know. And so the first couple practices, the game was different, so I was not in a groove, and I'm not a showy guy. I'm not going to do a lot with the ball. So I'm relying on, I got to get to know my teammates. The guards needed to get to know me and how I scored, or, what was the sweet spot for me as a player. And I knew that wasn't going to happen overnight. And so I don't think I probably looked all like it was kind of like going to IU that first year and just trying to learn a new game. I'm certain I didn't stand out. Way more physical. I would characterize the play over there at that time as like the college game on roids, stronger, men, the brand of basketball was more like college,
right?
But just with way better talent. Like these teams, I could tell you, you could take the NCAA champion, a Duke team loaded with, I believe this, loaded with, guys that are eventually going to play in the NBA and some high draft picks. In the middle of the road Italian league team would kick the shit out.
Yeah.
It's just a man thing. I mean, they're, physical guys.
Yep.
And playing a good brand of basketball that I ended up liking. Like I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but it felt more like college to me. In the NBA, at least on the teams I was on, I was standing in the corner, isolated, and if it swung around, I'm going to, step into a shot. But I wasn't moving and cutting, all the things I was so used to doing in college. And, you mentioned assists earlier. I felt like I could move without the ball and really put the defense at a disadvantage if I was moving and just reading things. I never played in an offense like that. It would have been great to play for a Pat Riley who ran a lot of stuff, Sloan, or the triangle with Phil. If you gave me a do-over, I'd have been politicking my agent to play for Phil Jackson because of all that movement that I would have shined in that. Reading and playing off somebody as good as Jordan or Pippen would have been a neat scenario for me, or at least to see if I fit better. But the brand of basketball overseas was really aggressive. I mean, if you lifted the ball over your head and you still had a live dribble, if you lifted over your head, I mean, a guy would just jump in. I mean, these guys were defense minded guys, but real tough guys that, there's no prima donnas over there. There's no red carpet, all the right. The adulation that the NBA guys get. These guys don't get any of that. And there's just a tougher brand of basketball. All those guys that we had a lot of teammates that came out of Yugoslavia and Slovenia. Now you're seeing Luka. These are tough guys that didn't grow up being told how great they were. They didn't get their ass kissed like the players do here. So there was just a general toughness. And we're watching the world caught up to us. I mean, we could still field a team and go win the Olympics, but it ain't a cakewalk.
Right.
And are we the most talented? By far. But there's a toughness that I think that we lack when we try to patch together a team, because you see it even right now, Luka, and I'm sure you're a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of his.
Yeah. Big.
He gets on a plane and goes over and he's working out with the national team. And he's getting treated like one of the 12 guys. They're not kissing his ass. That's how it is over there. And I kind of grew to appreciate that. It's what I was, it was the closest thing to playing for Coach Knight. Right. That to me made sense. Nobody's telling you how great you are. You're going to work. And so I ended up playing well that first year, and then just always got good offers, Then the next year I'm looking for a guarantee from the NBA. The guarantee doesn't come. Teams want me to come to training camp. And I had a lot of teams that said, hey, we really think you'll make our team, but you got to come to training camp. And I'm going, 2 months prior to the training camp, they're trying to pay me a bunch of money to go play. And I just kept taking it. And I have wondered, should I have gone just to training camp one time before I stopped playing and just see if I can make a team? And then if I don't, either go overseas late or hang it up. I just never did. I just kept on going over there. So I didn't hate it, but I did grow to like the brand of basketball for sure.
Wanted to close up a little bit on your family and folks. Brian Evans has just a beautiful family. I mean, this guy is really playing up a few levels here. So beautiful wife, Erin, daughter, Emerson, Lauren, Joe. Now, what I wanted to ask you about, was Lauren, who is going to be a junior this year, has made her college decision, and she has chosen a Big Ten school. And Brian Evans, where is your daughter Lauren going to college to play volleyball?
She's a Wolverine.
She is a Michigan Wolverine.
Wolverine.
Congratulations to Lauren. Now I've got to ask you, Indiana guy, Terre Haute, grew up watching the Hoosiers. He's wearing the candy stripes. I mean, how does this, obviously you're very proud. You're very proud of Lauren. Was there a little bit, is this weird a little bit? You're going to have to wear Michigan stuff, right? Is it, just talk me through this. How are you dealing with this?
It is really exciting. Really, really excited for the kid. She's put in the work. She's, deserving for sure. She had her own list. It was pretty cool to watch it unfold. I mean, my wife played volleyball at IU, so it's not like she didn't play sports. We just watched this unfold, and the kid was loyal. This was the first. It's kind of like her first love. The head coach at Michigan was the first guy that, when she was 13, that invited her to a camp in Ann Arbor. That was her first camp. It was her first, attention from a school. We talked about that when we first started, getting that letter from Western Illinois. Hers was from Michigan. I took her up for a one-day camp. She loved it. And this guy kept on recruiting her. I mean, before you could talk to the kids, I mean, he would send something. He would send a message through, like, legally to her club coach. And he just always had an eye on her. She had a list of, this was pretty cool. So the recruiting period started June 15th is the first time that coaches could reach out to the players. So June 15th, prior to your junior year of high school. And in her case, she and I, over the winter, a couple of different road trips from driving her to Tennessee for a weekend of volleyball. We had talked a little bit about recruiting and what she was, what to expect. Maybe, again, it's a lot different 30 years, down the road, but her schools were they tell you nowadays, pick out the schools you like and put them on your list. And then if they don't give you any attention, then take them off your list. It's almost like reverse recruiting. Like, you announce who you want to have recruit you, and then you sit back and see if they're interested. Lauren was pretty interesting. She didn't cast a big net. Most kids are putting 20 or 25 schools and just, the places their parents' alma mater, just make, a lot of top 25 volleyball programs. A lot of kids fall into that trap and do that. She put Indiana, no particular order, Indiana, Michigan, Notre Dame, Northwestern, and Duke were her schools. Oddly enough, the first day, June 15th, all of them minus Notre Dame reached out to her, which is pretty cool. So she got, all these schools were interested, but she really wanted Michigan. And so she went down and played really well at their national tournament, which is in Orlando, which was late June. He invited her up to their summer camp, which was last week. And they offered her, after the 2 or 3 day camp, we were up there on the way. We're driving home last Saturday, right around now. Actually, it was at 2:00 last week. And we had just left Ann Arbor. We're about 2 hours from home. And he called her up and made her the offer. And she said yes. So super proud. She got her dream school. Is it strange that it's Michigan? I'm past all that. I mean, this is too neat of a university. I mean, it could have been Northwestern or Duke, and we'd have been really, really happy for her. Michigan seems like the perfect place. It's 3.5 hours from home. They've got great stability. They got a coach, and his wife is the associate head coach. They've been there 24 years. Their first year there was actually Erin's last year at IU. So she actually played against a team that they coached. So there's a lot of stability. That athletic department is huge. That football money is real. That education is unbelievable, and it's in the Big Ten is far and away the best conference. So she's going to get to play on that big stage. The Big Ten network has gotten awesome. She's fortunate, but she deserved it. She worked her butt off, and she's a Wolverine. And I got 2 years to let that sink in before I have to put on those colors, but I'm going to do it with pride for her. But I have been asked a lot in the last week, like, are you really going to wear maize and blue? And I'm going to. I'm excited.
Well, good for you. And Brian's wife, Erin, played volleyball for the Hoosiers. And so she's got the same thing to work through. And I know both are very proud of Lauren. And then I got to ask you about my guy, Joe. This kid's playing hoops. Well, how is Joe, 10 or 11 now? How old is Joe?
He just turned 11. I'll send you a little, I got a couple clips of the guy. If I send you a couple clips, you'll see everything you need to know about him.
I need to, I have my eye on him. Now I hope Joe goes on in life to do whatever he wants to do. Now, should he be a basketball player, I'll root for him to be a Division I Hoosiers guy, but I got my people on him already. Should he start to slip through the cracks a little bit? What I don't want to happen is, I know how this works. Wabash is calling him, DePaul, Rose Holman's on him, Franklin's on him. My guy Owen Handy at Anderson's on him, Manchester's on him. Illinois Wesleyan right across the border there, right? So I got my people watching.
What's the drive time? You got to in your recruiting pitch, you're gonna have to lean on that you're not that far away.
Yeah,
you got all these schools in between you and there.
Yeah, 2 hours and 20 minutes from Indy. We're right on I-74. So I have people watching Joe Evans right now, seeing how he develops. If there comes a day when it's like, oh, geez, he's going to Indiana, we'll leave him alone. But I just wanted you to know that we've got some people watching him, and we kind of have we're in on the kid first.
I'll pass that along to one of my good buddies that knows Joe really well. Just said to me the other day, he's like, Joe's going to live to be 120. And I said, what makes you say that? He goes, that's the chillest guy with no stress in his life. He goes, nobody operates under less stress than him. It was an interesting comment. I'm like, you're probably right. This guy is going to live a long time. He doesn't get worked up about much. So we'll see. We'll see his personality with basketball, because you got to be a little bit more high strung, I think, to be really good. But we'll see.
And we'll make sure if he ever gets offered someday that he knows he's being offered and he knows that he's accepting. We'll make sure that all that.
Fair enough. I'll be on top of that. I learned my lesson.
Well, folks, that is Mr. Brian Evans. Of course, we've mentioned all the cool stuff that he's been involved. We haven't even scratched the surface, really. We just talked mostly about hoops. But Brian, I always like to give the QCast guest kind of the last word to make sure that for all your fans tuning in, that you leave them with whatever we didn't cover. So what would you leave the QCast guest with today, Brian Evans?
Well, I'm not aware that I have any fans, so I don't know how they would be listening. Knowing you well enough, I know you run a good podcast. I can tell you brought out some good stories, at least.
Yeah, I got a microphone.
I'd like to come back and do a second part when you can work me in. Like maybe it's a week that a big name guy cancels at the last minute.
Absolutely.
Whatever that may be, you can bring me on for like part 2 of the series. We can move on to some other topics.
Be great.
I feel like I want to have a podcast myself, so maybe I could participate somewhat differently. And this time was more of an interview. Maybe next time it's you and I talking hoop together. Maybe I need to do some homework on Indiana or on Illinois Wesleyan, so I can come bring something different, a different lens to your show.
Maybe we have you watch a game. They're all streamed. Maybe you watch a game. We have you on afterwards to give your thoughts on the breakdown, what went well, what didn't. There's a lot of ways we can use you on the QCast. A lot of ways.
Let's do it. I'm in.
Very excited about this partnership with Brian Evans here, and we'll help you. Look, you got to get kind of a microphone. You got to have some headphones. It's just, if you look the part, you'll start to be the part. That's my first advice to you.
Let me give you a funny one. You're going to like this. So, because it's a smaller school, you may know the school. So my wife and her dad are on the road with my oldest, who's a soon-to-be senior in high school, volleyball player.
Yep.
Emerson. And they are visiting for the last 3 days, Indiana University, Pennsylvania.
Absolutely.
Can you believe that?
The D2 school.
She may go to IU. She may go to, it's a D2 school.
D2, yeah, that's a good D2 school. Absolutely.
Yep, they're up there right now, and she's apparently had a really good visit, and not sure what's going to happen, if she's going to get offered anything this afternoon, but it's kind of a big day for her. So she's going to play at, we're not sure exactly what level. She loves the game. She's going to play. I'm taking her down to, there's actually a university in just outside of Naples called Ave Maria University. You ought to look it up. It was started by the owner of Domino's. Monahan is his last name.
Nice.
So he started this university down in between Naples and Marco, which wouldn't be the worst place in the world. I'm thinking we got this 6.5 hour drive to the east side of Pittsburgh or Naples, Marco. We're going to have to leave it up to the kid, but
Well, I would like to hear, please text me later if you find out that she's been offered by either school. But I will say, just in closing here, Brian, thank you so much. We've taken a lot of your time today, but I think this is great. We'll try to get some folks to tune in. I like to segment this up. They can listen to this in little 5-minute snippets based on the topics. In all seriousness, thank you. You've been great to my wife's family. You know, obviously being a huge part of their life. You've grown up, you know, down the street in Terre, Haute, and all the Brian Evans stories. I remember the day my wife's like, you remember the guy that played at Indiana named Brian Evans? I was like, yeah, lefty shooter. And she's like, yeah, that's my brother's best friend. So you've been great to Rose's family. When Brian passed away, you've just been incredible, staying in touch with everyone and letting the family know how much you're thinking of them. So I wanted to have behalf of Rose's family. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you don't have to say that. And those people have been, you're a lucky man. You've got a great family and come from a great family, but you married into an awesome family. They're great people. They were great to me way before I was good back to them. I promise you that. They're fantastic. And yeah, I've been lucky to, you know, have those guys in my life, and, you know, obviously went through such a tough thing losing a kid. But they've done everything with a lot of grace and dignity. And it's, you know, it's so sad, you know, still thinking about losing him is the worst. But that's just an awesome family. So pass that along. Say hello to everybody from me. And I'm back on anytime you need me on this thing. I like doing this. We've got a neat podcast that's called Hoosier Hysterics. You want to check it out. Some of you guys, diehard guys. So they kind of broke me into the podcast thing. I think it's awesome. I'm sure yours is awesome. I'll jump on and go try to go watch some of these episodes and get myself schooled up on Wesleyan hoops.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the first round NBA pick that's been on the QCast here. I mean, like the last guy.
I'm aware.
He was the number 8 pick. You know, so maybe I can get it.
Hey, dude, not many guys. Think about this. This is how many guys have a move
named after him.
Named after him.
Sigma move.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean,
the reverse.
He's been on the show. I mean, that's unbelievable.
So maybe we can get that was a good time. I get the number 1 pick on here. Maybe I've got a couple first rounders. Sooner or later, maybe we get the first round, the number 1 pick on the show. But maybe you can help me with that. Well, that'll kind of be part of your new role.
I can help you with that. I can help you with that. I will help you with that.
Yeah. See,
but you had Jack Sigma on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to send you this. I'm going to send you this video. The song "Be Trav" and I was a highlight clip from the mid '80s. Just an awesome clip to like a couple different rap songs from back then, and they voice over and just put different lyrics in it. And Jack Sigma he gets a shout out in this thing, and it's fantastic. I'm gonna go find it. I'm gonna send it to you.
Cool. Took Jack Sigma to the hoop, I believe is part of the lyrics in that song, right?
You got it.
right.
Yep, that's exactly right. Take Jack Sigma to the hoop.
There's not many QCast guys that have been in a rap song, so I want you to watch the Sigma QCast to get a flavor for that. But in all seriousness, Brian Evans, thank you so much again, folks. Brian, the Big Ten Player of the Year, 1996, first round NBA pick, an overall good guy with great stories. Brian, thank you so much for your time, and I can't wait to see you in Palm Coast so I can take a little money from you on the golf course again, my friend.
You would. You got too many rounds in on me. Hey, man, thanks for having me on. Good seeing you, Bob.
Thanks, man.